And thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, the Supreme Court taking up a case involving a Christian flag and why it was not allowed to fly at Boston City Hall when other flags were. A political surprise as more Americans now identify themselves as Republicans than Democrats, meaning Democrats could face major losses in this year's midterm elections. Plus, TSA looks for ways to increase security and convenience.
We need to continuously be innovative, and we need to continuously come up with new methods of improving security.
See how new technology could reduce the hassles of flying, and a life-changing experience for a chaplain to firefighters when he's asked to fight fires.
There's so much that goes through your mind. I was thinking, these are people's lives that are burning up. All of their worldly possessions, everything they've built.
Even then, see how his faith is put to work. All these stories and more are next.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And we begin with the Supreme Court hearing a case involving a Christian flag. 3 flags fly outside Boston City Hall: the U.S. flag, the flag of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and then a flag that celebrates other countries' cultures and causes. But while hundreds of private groups have been allowed to raise their banners, the city denied a Christian group from flying its flag. Caitlin Burke has the story.
Over a 12-year period, the city of Boston received nearly 300 applications for that third flagpole. They approved all of them except one.
These include flags of individuals, say, for example, the Metro Credit Union, the Gay Pride, Boston Pride, other causes. In addition to that, they also had individuals that would raise flags of their countries.
The sole rejection came in 2017 when an organization called Camp Constitution applied to raise a Christian flag and hold a 1-hour ceremony in honor of Constitution Day.
What they said was, while this was the first flag of a religious nature, they said that it would have been allowed to fly had it not been called Christian. So the same flag had no problem to the city as long as you didn't call it something religious.
Camp Constitution Director Hal Shurtleff sued the city, and now his case will be heard by the Supreme Court.
This case is so much bigger than a flag. It really involves whether the government can open a forum for a lot of different voices and then shut the door for Christian viewpoints.
Despite the fact that the city itself has referred to the flagpole as a public forum, its attorneys are expected to argue this is a case of government speech, meaning the flagpole speaks for the city of Boston.
That defies logic because Boston allows 2 competing Chinese organizations or individual groups to put opposite flags, both of the Chinese community, one pro-China, one anti-China, the other one pro-communism, the other one anti-communism. Boston cannot be pro-China one week, anti-China the next, pro-communism one week, anti-communism the next. That's classic free speech in a public forum. That's not the speech of Boston.
This case has attracted some unlikely allies. The ACLU, a group that normally fights against religious displays on government property, filed a brief supporting Camp Constitution. The Biden administration also supports their side. Staver, the camp's counsel, says this case will have significant implications on private free speech. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
A new Gallup poll shows a surprising change in politics. Americans have flipped their political preference from Democrat to Republican in the biggest move since Gallup began measuring party identification in 1991. In the first quarter of last year, Democrats had a 9-point advantage, 49% to 40%. But in the fourth quarter, the Republicans moved to a 47 to 42% lead. The parties were closer to even by the end of the year, but the poll, along with President Joe Biden's declining approval ratings, are the latest in a series of bad surveys for the Democrats going into this year's midterms. Here's CBN's David Brody.
Roughly a year ago, top Republican leader Kevin McCarthy predicted the GOP would take back the House.
This is the smallest majority the Democrats have had in 100 years. We could do it.
That prediction looks pretty solid right now. So far, 26 Democrat incumbents are retiring this election cycle. On the Republican side, only 12 are walking away. That's not a good trend line for Democrats.
What does that say to you, Rick? What's going on here? Yeah, it's indicative of the environment that Democrats know that they're in right now. By and large, the trend is more about people that are looking at the realities of how narrow the Democrats' majority is right now, how difficult an election cycle they're looking at, and are making a calculation that if they do get back to Congress next year, it's probably going to be in the minority.
This feels a bit like the 2010 midterms and could be even worse for Democrats. Back then, 37 in the party retired. It translated into a massive GOP pickup of 63 seats. Klein sees a similar pattern developing.
Traditionally, it's been a harbinger of a tough election cycle. So far, the retirement numbers are even above where they were during the Democrats' shellacking of 2010.
Typically, the party in the White House loses seats in the first midterm election. Still, Democrats hope some future policy victories will reverse course.
They will be able to talk about how we are fighting for and hopefully will have passed efforts to put in place universal pre-K, efforts to cut the cost of childcare, elder care, and make sure that we're investing in addressing the climate crisis. It is about a choice in this country, and we'd rather be us than them in that case.
That seems hard to believe with a narrow majority in both the Senate and House, along with President Biden's job approval below 50%.
This midterm election is shaping up to be particularly tough for Democrats. Because the Republicans are so close to the majority right now, the overwhelming likelihood appears to be that Republicans are going to win back the House.
With a titanic wave of retirements, the iceberg seems right ahead.
David Brody, CBN News.
Millions of Americans are feeling the impact of the major winter storm that hit the eastern United States, dumping massive snowfall in multiple areas. It left tens of thousands in the dark from North Carolina to Maine. I want to turn now to AccuWeather for a closer look.
Hey everyone, AccuWeather meteorologist Michelle Rotella here. It's been a busy past few days. Wanted to take a look back at this winter storm that we just had by the numbers, because we had precipitation in all different forms, a variety of weather. We had wind gusts up to 144 miles per hour in places like Mount Washington, New Hampshire. There was a severe side of this across the southeast, where we had an EF2 tornado in Fort Myers, Florida. We also had freezing rain across parts of the Carolinas and places like Pageland, South Carolina. You're still dealing with those impacts. You saw half an inch of freezing rain. And then Ashtabula, Ohio, look how much snowfall you had, 28 inches for snowfall totals. And we're still dealing with some lake effect snow. We're still dealing with gusty winds, though not as extreme as we had across the Northeast over the past 24 hours. But look at some of the snow reports across the Great Lakes area, near Lake Erie. You look at Edgewood, Ohio, over 25 inches of snow. It's going to be ongoing for today, so we could add on to what we're already seeing here. Now, across the Mid-Atlantic, the snow showers wrapped up pretty quickly, but even places like D.C., when you started off with snow, you saw over 2.5 inches. Now we head to the north central and the northeast. We have a clipper that's going to be moving across or near the border there of Canada, so you could pick up several inches of snow, and you could see that stretch its way across the upper Great Lakes and into the northern New England areas by the time we head into Wednesday afternoon. Highest snowfall amounts in the darker shade of blue, you could see 6 to 12 inches, but I do think that is going to be an extreme northeast Minnesota and the north of the Canadian border that we have the highest snow totals. We do have an AccuWeather local storm max of 15 inches. Now, let's talk about that Arctic blast that everyone's been mentioning that's going to take a deep dive across the Great Lakes and then stretching its way to the east-southeast, eventually to the northeast by the time we head into Thursday. So big changes on the way. Temperatures changing 30 to even 40 degrees over the next 24 hours. In fact, waking up tomorrow morning for places like Grand Forks and Fargo, it will feel like 30 to 40 degrees below zero. The cold shifts from Wednesday afternoon to Thursday afternoon across parts of the Northeast, and then we start to track a cold front that will work its way across the region, starting as some rain showers, and with colder air really sneaking in quickly back behind it, we could see a switch over once again to some freezing rain, and then ending up with some snow showers across parts of Virginia through the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, and then right up along the coastal areas, exiting by Thursday evening. Cold starts to spread its way across the area for our Thursday for the Mid-Atlantic, across the Great Lakes in the Northeast. In fact, by Friday, take a look at some of the high temperatures for places like Syracuse, New York. And then by Friday, we have to watch for more storm potential on the way for the weekend. It all depends on where this area of low pressure develops and how it tracks its way once again up the coast.
Still ahead, technology could lead to shorter lines at the airport. We'll have the story when we come back. The day you go through airport security with your shoes on may not be far off. New technology is being rapidly developed that will increase national security and reduce the hassles of flying. Caitlin Burke is back to bring us this report on the Transportation Security Administration of the future.
The terror attacks of September 11th meant an immediate change in air travel, but enhanced security measures evolved over time.
Unfortunately, there's continued to have events that happen. You had the underwear bomber, which changed the way we looked at people screening, and all of a sudden body scanners became the norm. You had the shoe bomber. So there's all these events that took place, and so there's a lot of a reactive approach to it.
By being proactive, however, the TSA and its partners have worked to stay ahead of potential threats.
We need to continuously be innovative, and we need to continuously come up with new methods of improving security. We have to keep coming up with new methods of doing it because our adversaries are also continuously looking at new ways to defeat what they know we have.
Kanan Krishnaswamy works at the U.S. Department of Energy's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. One of its missions is national security, and researchers are behind many of the screening technology in airports today.
The portals that you go through with your hands above your head, that came out of the laboratory. In fact, we lovingly at the laboratory, we call this the PNNL salute.
Those scanners use millimeter wave technology.
That technology, the basic technology and the basic invention came out in the 1990s. We've had that system or that technology available since the 1990s. Now, there was no real need for commercial deployment or deployment in the airports because airport security at that time was very different.
The initial technology was actually marketed to be used in apparel fitting.
You stand in the portals, get yourself measured so that you have exact body measurements that can be transferred to somebody that's making clothes, and they can fit clothes for you accurately.
Then 9/11 catapulted millimeter wave technology to the forefront of national security.
So that's the older generation of the technology that is currently being sold even today at the airports.
PNNL researchers are constantly working on taking their technologies one step further, and now a second-generation millimeter wave system is close to being deployed.
The way HexWave works is, first of all, it's a walk-through portal, and it uses radio frequency and real-time 3D video rate imaging so we can determine if an individual has a threat on their body. We've trained it to ignore some of the common benign objects, so you won't have to divest. So your phone, your keys, your belt, wallet, watches, glass cases. We use the AI so we can provide automated decisions to a security operator to process people at speed.
Bill Frame, the CEO of Liberty Defense, which developed HexWave, says the key differentiator between it and existing technologies is the ability to detect non-metallic threats.
And as you know, the people trying to do and defeat the system to do harm, they're being more creative. They're using 3D plastic guns. They're using liquid explosives. They know that some of these metallic detection systems out there can't detect that.
Liberty has also licensed a shoe scanning technology from PNNL that can be used inside the HexWave or existing body scanners.
Imagine if you didn't have to take your shoes off at the airport. Talk about, passenger experience. That's probably top of the list when we talk to people who are going through the airports.
While this scanning tech is a few years away, the HexWave system will soon be deployed to screen aviation workers who access secure areas of airports. After that, the goal is for it to be used at all security checkpoints, allowing travelers to pass through without breaking stride.
The goal is high level of security and detection capability, but make it so that there's a low false alarm rate so you continue to process the passengers and make it a good experience.
Some other interesting technology coming down the pipeline includes the ability to differentiate between powders and liquids in baggage, and a way to detect explosives in their vapor form so that bomb-sniffing dogs are no longer needed. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Reagan National Airport.
Still ahead, a chaplain trained to minister to firefighters is actually called on to fight fires. We've got the story next. A late season wildfire pushed by hurricane force winds tore through Boulder, Colorado. The fast moving fire started on December 30th, burning more than 6,000 acres in less than 24 hours. More than 1,000 homes were destroyed and 2 people still missing. But a chaplain in the area for one of the fire departments had been trained to fight fires, but never put that training to use until now. Here's Charlene Airy.
Chaplain Ross, we first of all, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. My first question, I guess everyone wants to know is, what's your role as a chaplain for the fire department there in Colorado? What do you do?
Yeah, so as a chaplain, which by the way, I've only been in this role about 6 months. And what I do is I provide spiritual care. I provide, hopefully, a calming presence in the firehouse. I provide peer support. Although I'm not a peer firefighter, I provide support, I provide resources, I help connect them with scripture, and do what I can to help with their spiritual well-being.
We know that the Marshall Fire there in Colorado was absolutely horrific. I think one of the worst fires in the state's history. Now, you were at the firehouse with the crew, they got the call. You rode along with them thinking that you were just going to provide support, and you get there and you quickly realize that you're needed to actually help fight the fire. What was running through your mind, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, well, initially I was in my house when they said we need volunteers, and I thought, I can volunteer, I can do whatever. I've been through a little bit of fire training with the department. So I went, and I know there was a little bit of apprehension on the part of the rest of the fire crew because I'm the chaplain, but they brought me anyways. And as soon as we got there, they actually told me I might not even get out of the truck. The lead firefighter, he said, you might have to stay in the truck, we'll see. As soon as we got there, he said, everybody get out. This is all hands. We moved from, we thought it was going to be grass fire, and it ended up being structure fire. And so they said, put your bunker gear on and let's go to work. And what I was thinking, well, the entire way there, Psalm 46, the first 2 verses, about God being my shelter and strength, and I won't faint, even if the earth gives way and the mountain falls into the heart of the sea. I was just praying that over and over again, and praying for these firefighters who were going into this crazy inferno. And so we jumped out, and I just tried to follow orders.
What do you take away from that? What lessons did you take away from that as far as, being a chaplain, and how's it helping you in your role to help the firefighters who do this on a daily basis?
There's so much that goes through your mind. I was thinking, these are people's lives that are burning up. All of their worldly possessions, everything they've built is just being consumed within a matter of minutes. And so that's in your mind. And then you're thinking these firefighters are doing everything they know how to do just to keep the other houses from catching and burning down. And so they just kick into gear and they just work. And I experienced that, and I understand what that is now.
How are you helping on the back end now that the fires have been put out? How are you helping and assisting? I understand there's some Bible distribution or some sort of resources that you're providing.
So my role with American Bible Society is providing scripture resources to churches and to some of the nonprofit emergency responding organizations. And what I've noticed, I was actually in the disaster center right after the fire, and I was holding a couple of booklets. And one of the victims walked up to me, and I had my uniform on, and we just started talking, and I asked how he was, and he was so grateful that I would even ask how he was. And he saw these 2 little booklets in my hand, and he said, I think my wife would like those. I said, really? Okay. So we walked over to his wife, showed him what they were. One is called God is Our Shelter and Strength, and the other one is called Beyond Disaster. And they just have little scripture portions and really good mental health best practices to help people think through what they're going through. And she lit up. And it struck me that I think, well, people know that scripture is grounding. And they want to know that God understands lament, They want to know that God understands and will be there with them and comfort them, and at the same time provide hope and encouragement as they go through the traumatic process that they've just gone through.
We appreciate all that you are doing, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. God bless you.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
For more inspirational stories and interviews like that, be sure to check out the prayer link. You can find it this evening at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time on the CBN News Channel. You can, of course, find that on the CBN News app as well. Coming up, what are the leading kinds of foods associated with food addiction? We'll share coming up next. Stay with us. There is power to refocus and end the cycle of food addiction. One doctor believes we must understand that food addiction occurs only with certain kinds of foods. Dr. Susan Pierce Thompson is talking about that on this week's episode of Healthy Living.
We're really talking about processed foods, and I like to alert people to sugar and flour, because it's really foods made out of sugar and flour, those highly refined, highly processed foods that, if you think about it, are made in the same way that heroin and cocaine are made, right? You just take the inner essence of a plant and then you refine and purify it into a fine powder, and that's where you get the drug.
You can see this entire interview in this week's episode of Healthy Living with Lori Johnson. It is on the CBN News Channel this evening at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And of course, you can also find that on the CBN News app. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. I pray this message will bless you and you'll be moved to post, tag, tweet, and share it with those in your circles. Remember this truth: the presence of problems does not mean that God is not present. His presence is your peace in the midst of chaos. With that word, I pray that you have a terrific Tuesday, and be sure to have yourself a wonderful rest of the week. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us. The address is right there at the bottom of your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Once again, make this a Tuesday. Join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.